I've written 7 books. This is my 7th, and this book is really a quest. I really did not know a lot before I started it. The science that really turned my head around was the one that answered the question really of why women aren't out there and why we should be. That was sort of my initial question, because I found that, well, first of all, there's a lot of science in this book, but I do not use science to tell you this statement, which is that we're getting such terrible messages about our aging journey as women, that it is going to be a decline, that we are sort of going to be way too frail for the uncertainties of life. So we have to narrow our life. We got to be careful. And we're boring. Like basically we have to, and we're not given the type of role models that men are, which is, like Harrison Ford running through the tube.
Are you ready to redefine what it means to age gracefully? Carolyn Paul is an inspiring author and adventurer who's on a mission to empower women to embrace the outdoors and break free from societal norms. Carolyn's journey is nothing short of extraordinary. As a writer and adventurer, she's dedicated her life to encouraging women to step outside their comfort zones and explore the world around them. Her latest book, Tough Broad, delves into the science and psychology of outdoor activities and their profound impact on our mental and physical well-being. Carolyn, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
I'm a writer. I think my story's kind of too big to just say in just a couple sentences, but I guess I'm best known for trying to bring adventure to women and girls, because I feel like we are not encouraged to stretch our comfort zones and go outside and explore. So my latest book is Tough Broad, From Boogie Boarding to Wing Walking, How Outdoor Adventure Improves Our Lives as We Age. And it's about, I look into the science and psychology of getting outside and how that is key for fulfilling aging for women.
I think getting outside, because it's so experiential, is also key for developing really heartfelt wisdom. Sports teach us a lot.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of studies on that, definitely for young people. But believe it or not, like I think women are told as we age to stop going outside, because I think the messages that we get is that we should be careful about our breaking bones and our sort of cognitive slide. And we're certainly not given role models like men are about getting outside and how vibrant and exhilarating it can be and how fulfilling. And so, yeah, so those messages are a little bit disheartening, because the outdoors is amazing for women as we age. Actually, it was kind of interesting because I wrote this book because I was 55 and I was looking at my own future and thinking, gosh, I don't see women my age doing the things I'm doing, surfing, being on an electric skateboard. I also fly experimental planes. And there were a lot of men my age and older, but none, maybe a couple, but hardly any women out there, often none at all. And I started to wonder, like, oh, maybe I'm supposed to pull back. But I was actually my best self in the outdoors. I've had an adventurous life for decades and decades. And so I wrote this book kind of as a quest to find out whether I could still keep outdoor adventure. And by doing that, I went and found I found a lot of science about it first, and then I found women and outdoor activities that would explicate that science.
Talk about the science a little bit.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I knew nothing, so this was really I've written 7 books. This is my 7th, and this book is really a quest. I really did not know a lot before I started it. The science that really turned my head around was the one that answered the question really of why women aren't out there and why we should be. That was sort of my initial question, because I found that, well, first of all, there's a lot of science in this book, but I do not use science to tell you this statement, which is that we're getting such terrible messages about our aging journey as women, that it is going to be a decline, that we are sort of going to be way too frail for the uncertainties of life. So we have to narrow our life. We got to be careful. And we're boring. Like basically we have to, and we're not given the type of role models that men are, which is, like Harrison Ford running through the tombs and at 75, or as I say in the book, James Bond villains. They're always like these older curmudgeonly guys. And yeah, they die. They get, shot by James Bond or some other terrible death. But before they die, they have this exuberant like need to take over the world. And we're just not given those role models. And I don't have a lot of science on that. We all know it. But what I found was that there's a lot of studies that show the way we look at our own aging predicts how well we age. So, that what that means is if you have a negative view of your own aging, you have a higher chance of a heart issue earlier and cognitive decline earlier. And the opposite is true. If you have a exhilarating, sort of exploratory outlook on your own future, you're happier and you're healthier, and you live 7.5 years longer. And I had never heard any of this. And there's a lot of studies that back this up. And then the question for me was, oh, well, that's great information, but how do we get that positive outlook in the face of this really insidious and constant barrage of messaging that, older women are not culturally relevant, and that we're sort of dropped in this gray area where nobody pays attention anymore. And we're not really part of the fabric, the cultural fabric anymore. We don't feel it. And I really started to realize that going outside is the antidote to that. It's the antidote to all this negative messaging. And it is where you can find that positive outlook because you're imbued with it. Because when you go outside, what nature asks of us is a direct rebuke to that messaging. You don't feel frail, you don't feel on a cognitive decline, and you definitely don't feel boring.
I've always said that if I feel bored, if I'm becoming boring, it's because I'm gonna have this backwards now. Actually, if I'm bored, it's because I'm becoming boring. And that's something I want to avoid at any age and at all risks.
One of the people I interviewed is a woman named Virginia Rose. She's a bird watcher. And I was interested in bird watching because it would get people outside, and it wasn't a super, high octane situation. Most of us could do it, especially because Virginia Rose is in a wheelchair and has been since she was 14. And she basically says, if you're bored, it's because you haven't made like a list of the possible things that you can do and looked at it and started to execute that list. That's what she does. She's a birder too. She doesn't do bird lists though, but she will make lists and she told me, once your best self is when you're exploring. So there's always something to explore in her mind. That really resonated with me.
How do you build courage?
By practicing. You practice. And I'm very interested in the way that we women, they filter everything through a lens of fear, whereas men filter everything through a lens of bravery. So if you have a man and a woman in the same situation, men has been taught to they will feel fear, but they make their decisions based on bravery, whereas we make our decisions based on fear. And it's because we're taught at a very young age to be fearful. And that's not because, our parents wanted us to be receding, diminutive people. Maybe there's a cultural sense of when we're helpless, we're more attractive or something. But in general, I do believe that parents are trying to do the best they can by instilling fear in us. They think if we're scared, we won't walk down that dark alley. If we're scared, we won't talk to that stranger. And I just think that's wrong. I think that as kids, we need to learn bravery because bravery gives you confidence in your own decision making. It allows you to make assessments about risk, so you become good at that. It allows you to understand that line between fear and exhilaration, because fear and exhilaration feel very similar. And a lot of time, girls mistake what they're feeling, and women, as abject fear when actually they're feeling exhilaration too. And I think what women need to do is change the lens. Don't put fear as the lens through which we see things, but try to put bravery as that lens and then start practicing bravery. Because I feel like women have been taught that if you feel fear, that means the situation is bad, turn around. Whereas men, if they feel a little fear, they're like, oh, this must be an exciting situation. Like, I'm going to go jump off that cliff. It's not always great. I'm not saying that, toxic bravery is a good thing, but I think they have something when they are using bravery as their filter instead of fear.
Yeah,
So
Martha
bravery is
McSally,
learned, Pat. Bravery is learned. So practice it.
I agree. Martha McSally actually said courage is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And I think that's incredibly true because as you start testing your own bounds, you're getting out of your comfort zone, and your comfort zone is getting larger and larger and broader and broader. And that opens the door to so much adventure. If you're going to stay stuck in a very narrow comfort zone as a man or a woman, your life is inherently limited.
No, I saw that over and over again when I was writing Tough Broad. So I was interested in fulfilling aging. And but what I ended up doing was talking to these women, and many of them had picked up an outdoor adventure later in life, not because they wanted to make their life bigger. It was
Mhm.
usually because there was some inflection point, like the pandemic, and they were like, whatever. And so, or a doctor would say, you need to exercise. And so they would pick, I interviewed a swimmer who picked up swimming in order to not, again, just to do what her doctor said, but as she told me, she learned to swim Vijaya Srivastava at 68. And when I met her, she was 74 and just now had a swimming practice. And what she told me was, as I was learning to swim, what I realized was, wow, if I can learn to swim, what else can I do? And so just by pushing her boundary in one area, suddenly she realized that there was all this other stuff opening up for her. So it's just like these gifts. And the same when I interviewed boogie boarders who were, they would get together to play in the San Diego surf. And Lorraine Voigt was 62. And she said, Caroline, boogie boarding changed my life. And I thought, how does a simple sport that kids do change your life? And the way she explained it was the big cold Pacific Ocean. I come out on windy days. I have to make decisions about waves. I'm helping my friends have fun. And look at me. I'm 62. And here I am doing all that. And what she had done was upended her own expectations of herself. And when you do that, it's really powerful. And she started to look at other areas of her life that she wanted to change. She wanted to get rid of her fear of heights. She was becoming more social. Uh, it was really transformative.
Oh, it sounds that resonates loud and clear. Well, who are some of the other people you talked to that really impressed you? I mean, everybody, obviously, but any favorites?
I mean, I interviewed my own mom because while my friends were lamenting their aging process, I actually wasn't. I was kind of looking forward to being 60. I was looking forward to whatever was going to happen. And I realized belatedly, of course, because we never give our moms the credit they're due, that really it was because of my mom. I saw her blossom in life. In When she was 40, she went back to school. She decided she was not happy with my father, so she divorced, which was turned out to be a great thing. She had a new career. And then again, I saw her at 60 when she was out of a relationship that she had valued. She had moved to a new town and she decided to pick up bicycling, not because she wanted to be courageous or not because she wanted to be fit, simply because she wanted a distraction. And then bicycling changed her life. She suddenly became somebody who was part of something bigger than her, and she had never felt social before. She was having all these fun adventures, and she had never been an outdoors person ever. And I was watching this from the sidelines and being like, oh, wow, being in your 60s, 70s, 80s, is really fun. Like, there's so much possibility. So I got to interview my mom about bicycling, and I got to give her her due finally. That was rewarding.
I think that had to be incredibly rewarding. Is there a spiritual dimension to a life of adventure?
So one of the things that I came into the book as was this sort of high octane adventurer. I
Mhm.
was a firefighter. I used to do first descents on rivers around the world. I've been bike packing all over the world, sea kayaking all over the world. Like, I had a very sort of adrenaline view of adventure. But during the writing of the book, I realized, oh, there's something that actually adventure gives me that I was unaware of completely because I had no word for it. And that was awe.
Mhm.
I found awe outside. I thought I was looking for adrenaline, but really what I was looking for, especially as I got older, was awe. And awe is obviously associated with religious experiences. It's sort of that feeling of fear and wonder at something bigger than you, mysterious. And nature is a surefire awe trigger. And awe is like a reset button for the brain. That's what the scientists call it, because it sort of upends our neural patterns when we feel awe. And it makes us, in the end, more open minded. And they've done studies that show it makes you more compassionate and full of gratitude. That is spiritual, in my opinion. The other thing about awe that they've found is that it makes you feel more interconnected with other beings and also your place in the world. They've done a lot of studies on this. And so, yeah, and so when you go outside and you look at the night sky or at the Grand Canyon or at even like a tiny bird or a flower, you are accessing your awe, and that's really good for you.
I think you're also exercising your capacity for joy.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about being outside too is often you're sort of in play, you're
Yeah.
playing.
Mhm.
And as adults, we really don't value play like we should, because I wrote about play in the book because it activates us neurally, which we want as we age, because we want our brain to keep firing, on all cylinders and keep learning and growing. And so play, which is basically purposeless, also something we don't often do, especially as Americans. Like, all our activities have to have some sort of end result, but
Mhm.
play by definition is purposelessness and sort of a loss of time, and that's important for us.
Yeah, I think that play and sense of awe is key. I remember during one soaring competition, one of the really famous pilots just decided, the heck with it. I'm not flying the course today. And he took off and he flew over Mount Shasta, and it was a beautiful day. And he just decided it was just too awesome to simply stick to the rules.
Hold it, are you a soaring pilot?
Yeah,
What?
I spent about 15 years flying high performance planes.
Oh my goodness, I did not know that, Pat.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
So you understand awe.
I totally get it. I totally get it. And I've told this story before, but briefly, you haven't heard it. I was flying one day over Tahoe, 16, 17,000 feet or so. And at the end of my wing is a little winglet, right? So the sun is streaming through the canopy, turquoise water below, a little bit of snow still on the mountains. I mean, it's just spectacular. And I turn, and my winglet balances on a bubble of air. And I ride that bubble of air, the whole plane and me, up through the sky. Sun streaming through the canopy, beautiful, beautiful environment. And it was a moment of absolute timelessness. It is as if I dropped into another dimension.
Mhm, mhm.
And that was some years ago now, and that has always stuck with me, because it goes to what you're speaking of, is the awe of being connected to all this, the awe of the outdoors. I think nature is one of the most fantastic playgrounds around, however you participate, in the air, on the ground, in the water. But I think getting outside and connecting with nature is actually part of our nature, and we need to explore that.
Well, actually, on a biological level, the science is really clear. Like, it's really good for us. In fact, a lot of people say, well, I work out in the gym, and that's great. I work out in the
Mhm.
gym too. But that doesn't preclude you going outside. Like, a lot of my outside things aren't workouts. they're being outside. I'm not trying to get like a good VO2 max. I'm there's a dimension that's more holistic than that. And so they know for sure that the tree chemicals that are emitted um, are really good for our immune system and lowers our cortisol. They know bird song also lowers our blood pressure, uh, and they think it's because if birds are singing, then our sort of amygdala or our primitive brain,
Mhm.
okay, there's nothing hiding behind the bushes. And the studies that really caught my eye were the ones that said when you're outside and the sort of soft, rounded aspects of nature, like hills and horizons, and the fractal uh, shapes of nature, like trees and leaves, they match really well with our retinal system. So what that means is when our brain is processing when we outside, it doesn't have to filter out a lot of noise like it does in
Mhm.
urban environments. And what that translates to is none of that low level anxiety that most of us go through the day with without even knowing that we're in a little bit of a fight or flight
Mhm.
thing because our brain is constantly like, whoa, loud noise, whoa, sharp, hard skyscraper lines. And it's trying to just always figure out how to keep us safe. But when you're outside, there's it's like restful. Like you when you work out, it's great to work out, but you need a rest day or your workout is a waste. And it is the same with the brain. Our brain needs to rest, and going outside offers that. So people that take a walk outside test better when they get back on cognitive tests.
Oh, I totally believe that. I walk every morning, before it gets too hot, and it doesn't have to be a long walk. Often it's not as long as I would like, but the point is I get my body moving in the morning. I get outdoors. It sets the tone for the rest of the day. And, going back to the topic of awe, I think once you experience awe, particularly in the outdoors, all of a sudden you can bring that to your everyday life. You can start seeing awe in a million things, a little butterfly in back, the wonder of a great meal you produced, whatever it might be. And I think cultivating awe is something that comes from play. It can come from intention, but intention turns into play when you're really present with what you're doing and your abilities meet the situation. But I think that cultivating awe is something that we really ought to integrate into our everyday life. It's game
And
changer.
it's some people. I was talking to someone recently who says, I don't know if I know how to do that. Even though he was a meditator, he was an athlete. They did a study here in San Francisco where they asked people between the ages of 60 and 80 to go on a walk
Mhm,
and to look at everything as much as possible with fresh childlike eyes. And in this way, they were trying to cultivate awe. That's what they
mhm.
called it. We're trying to cultivate awe in you. These are all walks. And sure enough, so one of the other things they said is, oh, and can you take a selfie during this walk? And it was almost an afterthought. So the all walkers, they self-reported lower rates of anxiety as the weeks went by, lower rates of depression, higher rates of compassion and gratitude. And this has all been like shown in other studies as well. They also, their inflammation markers went down. But more than that, when they looked at the selfies, the scientists, what they saw was initially in the first walks, the selfies were like how we take selfies. The face of the person was in the middle. But as the walks progressed, the face got smaller and smaller and off to the side, and the background got bigger and bigger. And what this
Oh,
suggested is that they were more curious about and more, they call it the small self perspective. It's the sort of the under a healthy understanding of your place in the world, because in fact we live in a world of anti-awe devices. Our phone and our computer, it narrows our focus, it centers us, it makes us feel powerful and in control. None of that is good for us. None of that is really true either. So this is to this idea of, yes, you can actually access all within you. You can cultivate it because these all walkers did it.
you bring up the topic of control, which is interesting. I've come to the conclusion that control is a total illusion. But and I think the outdoors helps with that. I can remember walking among the redwoods and pausing and just looking up at these magnificent, beautiful, huge old trees. I talk about putting things into perspective.
Right. Right, exactly. Like the ancient, like we're just a speck here. The thing about the outdoors too is I think it also does teach you control, but not in the way we think. It teaches you to manage what you can.
Yes.
And I think, and in fact, I have a chapter on this because I think it's taught me a lot about self-possession, self-actualization, making decisions under pressure, making decisions, and then going out. But the flip side, it also is like, but not too much. Like you're not too much in control. Like it's gonna rain, or and especially now, we don't know anything about the climate anymore. So it's gonna you can go out and suddenly it's searingly hot. So it teaches us both, and I think that's important.
Yeah, I think one of the metaphors I took away from soaring is the idea that there are these massive, powerful, invisible sources of energy in the air, and you're privileged to ride that energy. But I can remember flying one day. I was down by Mount Grant, out in Nevada near Mono Lake, and uh, I was looking for lift, and there was this big cloud that just looked perfect. So I headed over for the cloud, and the cloud had this like dark underside, which is good in terms of lift, and it had this tendril that came down in like a little hook, and it batted my right wing, and the plane went scurrying off. I mean, you don't have any control over that. And I thought, that's where I want to climb. I'm going back. I went back, and the cloud had another tendril that came down and batted my right wing. And I thought, the universe has a sense of humor, but I'm not meant to be here today.
I think maybe you narrowly missed a situation that actually happened to me, which is that I got cloud sucked
Oh, I
while.
have too.
Oh, well, yeah.
Tell
I
me
mean,
your story.
well, I was a paraglider. So I was learning how to thermal fly, which is what you do all the time. And for those of you who don't know, that's just looking for these invisible columns of rising air. And the way you find them is because you can't see air. You look for birds, or you look for building cumulus clouds. No gray on the bottom. We didn't want gray on the bottom, I guess. Well, I didn't know that at the time because I only got a cursory introduction to how to do this. So I got kicked out of a couple thermals. My own fault. You circle and then you circle too widely. And so then the thermal, which is also moving across the land as well as going up. Yeah, it's difficult to thermal
It is
fly.
hard.
Yeah, and you're in a bigger situation than I am, which I guess is good because your wing can catch stuff, but also I'm sort of more nimble in some ways. Anyway, it's hard. And but then I found this thermal and was super happy because I was just getting rocketed up and thought I
Mhm.
was doing great until it began to mist over. And I thought, oh no, I'm getting in the cloud. That's not supposed to happen. I was supposed to, according to my friend who told me, I was supposed to kind of stop at the top because when a cloud starts forming, that's when the air is cooling. So it's not rising anymore. But if you happen to have picked a building cumulonimbus cloud, which is a
Yep.
building thundercloud by accident, you are not going to stop. And that's what I had done. And so it was, and I knew what it was because I had heard of paragliders getting sucked into thunderclouds and either dying, or in the case of one woman, getting spit out at 32,000 feet. And luckily her wing was intact and she gained consciousness at about 10,000 and managed to fly to the ground. But it's the place you can die. I don't know, what is it like in a glider?
Terrifying. I had moved from the East Coast to the West, so we're talking about two totally different air masses, different flying conditions, different social conditions. Back east, you tend to fly in a club where you have a lot of knowledge that's shared. It's a real learning experience. Out west, there tend to be commercial operators, so you miss that camaraderie. So here I am, new to the West, dealing with new density, altitude, and everything that goes with that. And I'm flying one day, and I always pay attention to the weather, but as you know, when you're flying, you can't see what's happening above cloud base necessarily. You're looking at cloud base and looking at things develop. And I'm seeing some clouds develop, and I'm thinking, oh, that's nice. But what I didn't know is they were actually developing into QNIMs. And I got pulled up. It was horrible. It was violent. I have a 5-point harness, and 2 days later, it looked like somebody taking a baseball bat to me. I was
Oh,
black
wow.
and blue. I
Oh,
got pulled up. I couldn't control anything. The only thing I could control, I'm well over VNE at this point. The only thing I could control
boy.
was to try to get out of the freaking cloud. There's lightning going off my right wing. And
What?
I'm here like, is the w are the wing spars simply gonna break? Am
Mhm.
I gonna have to jump? I always wear a parachute and everything.
What?
And oh, yeah, you always wear a parachute, flying. So and had I ever done a parachute jump? Of course not.
But had you heard of someone who had gotten into a thundercloud so you knew what to do, or was this not
No,
something?
no, it was just a matter of figuring it out. But I had heard of people whose wing spars had broken under extreme stress and things like that. And in one 3-year period, 25 people died soaring. One person was shot in San Francisco. That wasn't a flying accident, but all the others were aviation accidents. And it really turned my head in terms of the risks. I was beginning to wonder about the risks because I don't go up and fly around the airport. I go out and I fly a few hundred miles, or I fly a task or whatever. I fly for altitude, 30,000 feet out of Minden's pretty easy on a good day. Oh, it's really cool. But at
30,000.
any rate, I by luck, I've navigated out of the thunderstorm. I tested the plane ever so carefully because I
How did you
remember
navigate out of it, though? I don't understand because it's
sheer
still
luck, sheer luck.
you just happened to maybe make a turn and you just got out of it or you got kicked out of it or
Got
something?
kicked out, made a
Oh,
turn
wow. That's
sheer
amazing.
luck. Yeah, and I got out, I
Was it
remember
was it completely whited out or dark? What was it? White, dark? I
white, it was
remember only
white.
white. Okay. I didn't see any
Um,
thunder though. Like a lightning. Oh my
I
goodness.
saw lightning right off my right wing.
Yeah, no, I know. That's what I was waiting for. I knew that was next. Hail,
Yeah.
lightning, thunder, freaking I don't know what in there. Like I'd heard. We all heard.
Well, and after a while, I wised up flying out west. I started to look for these building systems. You can see them from a distance if you're smart and you know what you're doing. And obviously, they have winds and downdrafts that extend out 20 or 30 miles. So you have to start making some decisions about where you're going to fly. Are you going to land? How are you going to manage this developing weather?
And you land completely without an engine, or do you have one that you can turn
No,
on? I
no
don't
engine.
no engine? How do you get up? But with an engine?
Tow, aero tow.
A tow. So
Yeah.
nothing. You're not oh, wow.
Well,
Yeah,
no.
that's amazing. That is good flying that
Oh, it's
you are a pilot. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
No, there are some sailplanes these days that are, self-launching or
Yes, I've seen
self-sustaining.
those. Yeah, we
Yeah,
have seen
and
those.
those are plus and minus. The self-launching is a plus in that you're not dependent upon anybody, and if you can land out at an airport or someplace, you can, relaunch. But the downside is complexity, and if that, propeller does not retract, you now have a pretty hairy situation you're dealing with,
Oh,
not only in
interesting.
terms of flying, but in terms of trying to land or navigate in any way, and that does happen.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. That sounds okay, get it. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, and so question for you. So when I fly, I actually don't like flying really high because I feel lonely. There's a loneliness, and I think it's an existential loneliness, but I think it's actually, I mean, it's a little bit like that invisible filament, supposedly some people say that we have attached to our home Earth is stretched too tight at a certain altitude for me. So I just get, and I'm alone up there. And of course, you and I both know that altitude is actually safety.
Oh, yeah.
The higher you are, the more time you have to make decisions, the better it is. But there's something, yeah, lonely about it.
I
Tell
think
me what it's like at 30,000.
Oh, it's so cool. It's freezing. It's negative 50 degrees. So, it's very cool, but mostly it's just so spectacular. Things have changed a little bit since I was flying, those sorts of flights, but it used to be you'd call down to Oakland Center, and there's a wave window at Minden, and they'd reroute all the jet traffic around you. And then they keep opening the window another 5 or 10,000 feet, 5 or 10,000 feet. But with wave, you're going up so fast, you got to get that window open.
And they do that. They're like, sure, we that's easy for us. We'll let this one glider pilot dictate all the traffic coming in. That's so cool. Yeah, no, I've heard about the wave. The wave. I don't. Yeah.
Wave is amazing. And then there's another, maybe have you run into any convergence zones
I mean,
where you get two masses of air colliding and they create lift?
uh, yes. I mean, over certain mechanical turbulent situations, I've
Yeah.
definitely had that. But I think I'm not as schooled as you because I do now. I fly a gyrocopter, so I have a motor, so
Mhm.
I'm not as dependent on just the mere forces of nature. So I'm less aware, which is too bad. But I certainly have like, there's been, there's obviously all those weird shears at different, when the gradient is different between wind masses, but you know all that more than me. I
I've
just flew over, so I just flew over, decided you'll I flew over, I went from the Bay Area to Sedona, Arizona in my gyrocopter. My gyrocopter is a small open cockpit, basically just me and this open air and this rotor on top.
mhm,
And I flew over the Sierras, then over Death Valley,
mhm.
and then over the Grand Canyon. It was awe-inspiring.
Totally awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, the gyrocopter sounds like fun. I've flown, ultralights, and I flew an ultralight with pontoons. That was really fun.
An ultralight meaning a hang glider with a motor, or there's many ultralights, or a fixed
Um,
wing?
Fixed wing.
Oh, okay, fixed wing. Yeah, I don't fly fixed wing anymore. I find them a little boring.
I find power boring.
Yeah, I get that. I get that.
The only time I really enjoyed flying power, um, was, let's see, trying to think. Alright, Citabrio. I belonged to a club, we had, like, 6 planes, power planes. I had my own sailplane. Um, and one of the planes was an aerobatic Citabria, a tail dragger. I used to take that out on the wildest, worst days when no one would fly. All the pilots are hovering in the FBO, afraid to go out because it's so
Yeah,
wild. I'm like, "Oh, man, this is fun." And with a tail dragger, as you know, you have to really be on it. You have
yeah.
to really focus
I've
and be
heard. I
there.
don't fly them, but I've heard, yeah.
And, I thought that was a lot of fun. For me, a lot of people have said that flying sounds like it's an adrenaline rush. It is not for me. For me, it's about competency first and foremost, and then it's really about awe. And I think that combination of competency that builds to awe is something I would wish for everybody to experience.
It's a unique perspective on the world. I mean, I think also, yeah, it's all because you also feel so small. I mean, this
Yeah.
country is so big, and you don't realize it until you're in a tiny plane flying over it, or a glider. Uh, so yeah, but not everybody can fly. We're super lucky. But luckily, what I did realize, and it's funny because I found this concept of awe about halfway through the book. It was real that I did not know. And I looked back on some of my adventures that I had written about and realized, oh, I had been experienced awe with these people too. So I went on a walk with somebody because I wanted to look at mere movement as we get older, and walking is accessible to a lot of us.
Mhm.
You don't have to be, in incredible shape. You don't have to have a lot of knowledge. You can just go outside and walk. And I realized that the person that I had been walking with was taking me on an all walk, because she stopped at everything. She marveled. She talked. She quoted poetry. She was 93 years old. And then when I went bird watching too. Bird watchers, they can be awed by that same brown bird that they've seen all the time. And I love that. That capacity for awe is also, it is catching. It's contagious. So being with them, I was amazed.
If you could give 3 tips to women who are getting a little bit older, 3 suggested courses of action or pieces of wisdom, what would you say?
Well, the first one is definitely the science was unequivocal about the way we look at our own aging predicts how well we age. So you have to stop with the sort of self-talk and the belief that our aging journey is going to be this white knuckle ride of terribleness. And again, the way I think you do it is to go outside. And that's because when you go outside, none of that messaging is true. So, but find your own way outside. You don't have to be a glider pilot like you, Pat. That's rad. And you certainly don't have to learn to fly a gyrocopter like I did for the book, or I scuba dive with an 80-year-old. None of that. Just find your way outside. And one of the best ways to do that is to find a friend, do it with them. Then you're accountable. You'll keep doing it. And uh, also say yes to somebody who asks, and just do it in small steps. I think small steps is key. I think that was like 3 or 4 or 5.